All right.
Huh?
So here I am, out walking my grandson. I want to talk to you today about mass shooters as children. What happens? I don't believe a lot of these, if not most of these mass shooters that are coming on scene are dealing with childhood pain. I don't see it. I think they're just copying or copycatting the shooters and the killers before them to a degree. I know there's childhood pain in it, a lot of childhood pain. So let me just explain to you about some of these mass shooters dealing with that pain. You know, a lot of these kids, they have something in their lives at an early age that something happens. Maybe a molestation, maybe they just misfits from the start. Maybe they're just not, they're just clumsy. Maybe so the parents leave them alone at a young age. Whatever the situation is, to a degree, they're just left alone, fend for themselves. The reason because they can't fit and adapt in with the family. They can't adapt in with the other siblings. They're just different. They're weird. So they're left alone. We leave weird kids alone to fend for themselves. And so a vacuum forms in their life. A void is created in their lives. And in that void, because it's not dealt with, or it's not cured, or it's not, we as parents at that age, because we're trying to make money, take care of a family, raise a family, provide for a family, we don't always see it. And that void becomes a vacuum in their life. And everything that child does, or even from just not being able to play right with siblings, maybe has an anger problem, temper tantrums all the time, throwing fits, throwing stuff, just a misfit. So he has that void in him that's causing this to happen. As he grows and no one's really dealing with his void, that void becomes a black hole which begins to suck everything into it. That he has his emotional understanding of things, his rejection by other people, by life itself. He begins to have this black hole in his life. So as he grows up and as he's moving through life into adolescence, he brings this into his life. Never picked for the basketball team, never always picked last for the cul-de-sac games or whatever. Always rejected, always left out there, always left to fend for himself in his room, always by himself in front of the boxes. And I'm not blaming the boxes, they have their part in all of this. But there's that vacuum, there's that void that is always present in his life. Always there, sucking the joy out of his life, sucking the meaning out of his life. So he begins to become something that he's familiar with. I call it the monster in the basement. That monster in the basement, it becomes a little child. The more he feeds it, the stronger it becomes. And that child in the basement is something that he wants to be. He wants to be successful in sports. He wants to have girlfriends. He wants to be noticed. He wants somebody to look at him, recognize him. But all he ever hears is shut up, be quiet, sit still, be there. Don't be any problem. Don't be any more trouble than what you already are. And that's all he hears all his life. And so when he hears all that nonstop, he begins to believe it. So he creates another persona, the monster in the basement. And he begins to feed that monster in the basement with scraps that he understands, things he understands. And as he feeds it, that monster grows as he grows. And soon he latches on. I've told you this before. Mass murders, mass shooting, and mass killers, it's a journey. It's a journey. It's a journey. It's a journey to a point of extreme, to a fruition of an extreme act of violence. You don't just wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning, say I'm going to oil up my AR-15s and then run to the high school and start blasting away. That's not how it works. They get a idea for violence, an idea to kill in their head at a young age. And then they get a taste for this violence through molestation or for the rejection or whatever, through this void that's in their life. It amplifies it. And so by the time they're in their adolescence, 16, 17 years old, the only thing that's handed to them is these games of murder and mayhem. And they become very good or skilled at them, or they just become experts at laying low, laying in their lairs, laying at computers that nobody monitors, searching the dark webs, on the web, finding out the things, finding there's other people like him. And what he begins to do is associate and look for people that are like-minded and like him. And he finds these people in the form of mass shooters, dead mass shooters. Because these dead mass shooters, once they're dead, and in the ground, and the talking heads are just droning on and on and on continually about them. The poor guy who's had this void and this vacuum and this black hole his whole life begins to see the similarities of these dead mass shooters. And he begins to say to himself, hey, I understand. I understand what this guy went through. Now, I was just like him. All the droning heads on, well, Billy did this, and he was this, he was that. He went here, he and the live killer, who is lying in wait with this idea to kill, is saying, oh man, I know. Now I feel his pain. Now I know exactly. That's what I'm going through too. As they begin to identify, and all of a sudden that black hole of nothingness and hate and vengeance and revenge and despair and rejection that they've been carrying their whole lives, that monster in the basement begins to rise up. He wants to break loose from his chains. He wants to speak to the world. He wants the world to know, I have a voice too. I have something I can say. I have something I want to say. And so when they come on scene, it's not to cure childhood ailments or illnesses or things that happen in their child. It plays a lot of it in. That's just a few of the ingredients. What they're there to do is speak to the world. And they're speaking with the voice of violence. And the voice of that violence is going to be loud. It's going to be louder than anything that you could possibly imagine. And they speak. And the next day, guess what? Somebody who didn't know, we didn't know his name at all. We didn't even know he existed. We didn't even know who he was. All of a sudden, the whole world knows who he is. Wikipedia knows who he is. He's all of a sudden put in the history books, and you can't stop it. He's there forever. That's enough for now. I'm out of breath. I'm an old man, walking a young man, pushing a young man on his tricycle. That's mass shooters. They're not just people that are just randomly waking up saying, I'm going to go. But there's a reason what they're doing. And a lot of time it is to cure childhood ailments. But a lot of time, most times, in my opinion, they are copycatting. They're taking this pain and this illness from childhood and this rejection and all this sorrow that they live with. And they're taking it and all this weirdness and strangeness that they've had in their life where they've had to sit alone by themselves and fend for themselves and take care. They're taking all of that into the equation, and they're taking all of that into the situation, and that's what they're doing. They're launching out to show the world, I am somebody. And when they're done, Lord God Almighty, they are somebody. They're just another mass shooter that has killed the innocent. That's enough for now. I can't hardly breathe.